you can see the headline there on screen. Israel admits to, quote, immense amount of what it calls friendly fire on the 7th of October. This is a short story I did just about the admission in Ynet by the military correspondent of Ynet, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, who wrote just that. He wrote that that according to, well, let me get the exact quote up on screen. It's
while you do that, while you look for that quote, Asa, I'll also comment that for us, the most important part of the story written by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was sort of buried in the second to last paragraph, and it wasn't the headline. We'll come to, I want to talk about what the headline of the story was, but for us, the most important news in this story was buried in that penultimate paragraph.
Right, exactly. And unlike a lot of other of these stories about the 7th of October that have come out in the Israeli press, this one was translated into English. And the story in general was about how, since the Israeli incursion into the Gaza Strip, we talked about casualties earlier in the stream, but they say that a certain number. What is it now, John? What are they saying now? It's 100 dead, is it?
Right. At the time of the story, it was 105, I think. Now they're admitting to, I think, as of this morning, 116. But
that's not including October 7th. That's just the soldiers in the street.
But Asa, I don't know if you have that quote from your 𝐓𝐡𝐞, but I think we should actually read it, because it's so telling, especially the way that it's buried. Or I have it up here, I think.
I got it too.
Okay,
So the article is about how friendly fire has been happening. So-called friendly fire has been happening in the Gaza Strip. Basically, soldiers have been accidentally shooting each other while invading the Gaza Strip. But then at the end of this article, in the penultimate paragraph, it says this: casualties fell as a result of friendly fire on October 7, but the IDF, the so-called Israeli Defense Force, the Israeli military, believes that beyond the operational investigations of the events, it would not be morally sound to investigate these incidents due to the immense and complex quantity of them that took place in the kibbutzim and southern Israeli communities, due to the challenging situations the soldiers were in at the time. End of quote. So this is a huge admission buried really towards the end of this article. We have the military correspondent of one of Israel's most important mainstream media outlets saying that the Israeli military believes that there was an immense and complex quantity of so-called friendly fire incidents in the kibbutzim and in the southern Israeli communities. And this is exactly what we've been talking about.
That's what we've been saying all along from the very beginning, and we were reporting it. Of course, we had the testimony of Yasmin Porat, who survived the massacre at Kibbutz Be'eri, and in the last couple of days, the other Israeli woman who survived that massacre, Hadass Dagan, has also spoken for the first time to Israeli media, and she confirmed what Yasmin Porat said, that basically it was the tank shells that killed all the Israelis, including the little girl you see on the screen right now, Liel Hatzroni. So this is now, we have this admission, but we have something else. Tamara, I'm going to ask if you can put this up on the screen for us. I've just sent you this tweet I did, but it contains the images that I want to show exactly. So this op-ed appeared in Haaretz yesterday, in the English edition and in the Hebrew edition. And it says, and that photo there is actually from Kibbutz Be'eri. And what we've been saying all along is that Kibbutz Be'eri, the images that show all these devastated and demolished houses, are clearly the result of tank shelling, not the small arms that Hamas fighters were carrying. And as Yasmin Porat testified from the very beginning, the Hamas fighters, in her words, treated the Israelis in the kibbutz humanely. That was her word, be'ofen anushi in Hebrew, in a humane manner. And what now this article in Haaretz is calling for is saying, did Israel implement the so-called Hannibal Directive, which allows the military to endanger a soldier to prevent them from being kidnapped at the hostage-taking incident in Be'eri on October 7th? And Tamara, I don't know if we're able to show the other image or quote from this article, because the writer of this article asks directly, did Israel, here we go, we must determine exactly what happened that day being October 7th. Was there a decision to eliminate the terrorists, even if there was a significant risk that the hostages would also be killed? Was the Hannibal Directive applied to civilians? And she's not just saying, the author of this article is not just saying that Israeli civilians may have been killed accidentally as a result of indiscriminate fire. She's going further and asking, was the Hannibal Directive applied? In other words, was there a decision to open fire knowing that Israeli civilians would be killed? And of course, Asa, you'll recall the previous story you did just a few days ago about how an Israeli colonel admitted in Haaretz podcast that to use his term, a mass Hannibal was applied on October 7th. And this, in fact, lines up with the evidence, which is the hundreds of burned bodies, incinerated bodies, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of incinerated cars, civilian cars, the footage we saw and we reported on over the last few weeks from Israeli helicopters of the Apache helicopters just strafing civilians indiscriminately. And of course, the tank shelling against the houses and the witness testimonies. All of that lines up, that physical evidence lines up with what Israelis themselves are saying and have been saying. What it doesn't line up with is the idea that the Hamas fighters did all that, because how were they going to do all that with their AK-47s, maybe some hand grenades, maybe the odd RPG, but nothing like the type of weapons that...
Not artillery to flatten a house wholesale.
Absolutely, or to incinerate literally hundreds of cars, highways of death, that could only have been done by the kind of weapons Israel possesses. Now, just to go back for a moment to the story that you reported on most recently, Asa, the one we just showed a moment ago, this story, the headline of your 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 story, again, this is in Ynet, one of the main publications in Israel, is that 1 in 5 of the soldiers that Israel admits were killed in Gaza since the ground operation began. So now we're not talking about October 7th. We're talking about the ground invasion of Gaza, which began in mid to late October, after around 2 weeks or so after October 7th. So they're saying, according to the figures they're admitting to, as John has already told us, these figures are probably almost certainly a huge undercount. But they're saying, the Israelis are saying, 20% of our soldiers were killed by our soldiers. And this is in the context of a commanded and controlled military operation where presumably the Israelis believe that they are taking the initiative and they're on the offensive, and they're still killing 1 in 5 of their own soldiers.
Yeah.
What would be the case on October 7th when we know that the Gaza division, the Southern Command, completely collapsed? There was no command and control. According to the helicopter pilots and the accounts they've given in the Israeli press, they had no one giving them orders. They were just told, go up in your helicopter and shoot at anything that moves. Shoot at everything was the order. I'm quoting.
And some of the tanks just arrived by themselves.
And some of the tanks arrived by themselves. We had those two, again, going back to what John said, in an effort to create heroes, a couple of weeks ago, the Israelis put forward in the media these 3 young women who were driving around on October 7th in a tank. And the Israeli spin was, look at this girl power, look at these girl bosses driving a tank and killing terrorists. But what they actually said in the interview on Channel 12 was really disturbing to anyone who is just not completely brainwashed by the Israelis, which is that we were driving around in the tank. No one was giving us orders. We were firing weapons we weren't trained to use and never used before. And when we did encounter someone, she recounts at one of the kibbutzes, a man told her, I think it was an officer or a kibbutz security guard, shoot at that house. And she said, who's in it? Is it terrorists? Is it civilians? And he said, I don't know, just shoot anyway. So if it's 20% friendly fire, yeah, there we go. That's it. They put it out as this great example of heroics, but it was really an example of how completely chaotic it was. So 20% when they have strict command and control. John, is my interpretation correct to think that if they're killing 1 in 5 of their own soldiers when they're in control, that the number of their own people that they would be killing in a chaotic situation of total collapse on October 7th may well be considerably higher than that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. And I think there's going to be investigations in Israel into all of this. And that's part of the reason why they're lying is so it's going to end up becoming a catastrophe for their image when this stuff, well, if it comes out. I mean, I don't know what the way the media in the West works, but I mean, I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that only one infant was killed on October 7th. I think people have been told for all this time these numbers that are completely, both the Israeli numbers, all the numbers are just mangled in such a way that it's just propaganda piled on top of propaganda. And even that friendly fire story, they said that some of those people killed in friendly fire were killed by shrapnel in their controlled demolitions. So those propaganda videos, like in Nora's opening, where they show blowing up the Palestinian Legislative Council, like Palestinian Parliament, or blowing up a United Nations school, and the soldiers are all lying on the berm, hiding, watching, filming with their cameras, and then cheering. People died in those. So that's not a good way to go. If you're trying to create a hero and you're lying with your camera phone recording a completely unnecessary, like not from a bomb, they're actually wiring these buildings and then moving back and exploding the buildings and then killing their troops in that explosion. It's the level of absurdity. Yeah. I mean, I think 20% sounds really high. I mean, if we're going to speculate on it, I think what's going to happen is that the Israeli casualty count is going to go up considerably. It looked bad previously if they said 10 in a day, but now that they're reporting 10 every day, I think it's going to be easier for them to slip in the extra ones and to get that number up, because there's no way that 20% of what we've seen on camera of Israeli casualties is by their own forces, thereby lowering the number that have been killed by Palestinians, which is this kind of weird thing that Israel does, as if you kill your own people, it proves that the resistance isn't as strong as they thought it was, when really, and as we're going to show you in the next hour, you're killing each other because you're idiots and brutal at what you're doing.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment, These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.